I am having a blast today painting these small mixed media art cards. It's not every day that I come into the studio knowing what I want to make, but today was an exciting exception. Join me while I build up layer after gorgeous layer to make fun cards to frame or give away. I'm Jackie Bernardi, and welcome to my studio. This is going to be easy breezy. I'm just using a few colors, some really beautiful paper. This is actually paper called Thai Gossamer. It's paper, but it acts like it's fabric and it is just gorgeous. So what I am planning to do today is make some cards. Now, these cards, some of them will maybe go to somebody if they turn out nice, or I may just frame them for myself. I'm not sure yet. But I love the colors that I have going here, and I'm going to do all of this on watercolor paper, and that's what you're seeing here. I've pre-taped off several pieces of watercolor paper so that there's a nice clean edge around each card, and I thought it might be helpful for you to see my technique for taping. And I know you're probably thinking, who needs a technique for taping? Well, raising my hand, I do, because so many times in the past I have taped off my edges and I have not paid attention to how I taped the paper, so that when I am peeling the tape off at the end of the thing, sometimes it's buried under another piece of tape, and all of a sudden I'm pulling things in many different directions and I risk ripping the paper. So I don't want to do that. So I created a system that would prevent me from making that kind of mistake. So what you've seen me do here is put two pieces of tape, this is white artist tape, across the paper, top and bottom. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write the word under, right, on all four corners of the tape. Now you might have noticed I made a tab out of the tape. So I went over the edge of the paper with enough tape that I could fold it over onto itself and create a tab. That's going to be very helpful when I go to pull it later. And I would recommend you doing that. Now, when I'm laying the top pieces down, I'm going right over the pieces of tape that I already put down. I'm creating little tabs at the end for those pieces as well. And this way, I'll be able to pull those easily by using the tab. Now I'm going to use the pencil to write in on these tabs above. So the first tape that went down, I wrote under, and the tape that I put on top, I put above, so that I'm super clear at the end of this project. When I start pulling tape, I pull the right pieces of tape first. Okay, does that make sense? Another thing that I did is that when I put the tape on the edges of the paper, I just microly went over the edge so that the actual edges of the paper don't get paint on them. And that's just a little pro tip to give you there. You want to get to the edge, but then just a teeny tiny bit over it to do that. So here I'm just using a regular old-fashioned pencil and making some marks on the paper just to get started. I do this frequently. It helps me not get stuck on what I should be doing, and it gets me started. And so it doesn't make any rhyme or reason. What you're seeing here, this piece of paper, is one solid piece of watercolor paper. It's, I believe, 9 by 12. And what I've decided to do is make two cards on this one piece of paper. It's all taped off, and I'm just going to start laying down paint. The colors that I'm using right now are the iron oxide red, transparent iron oxide red from Golden, as well as the Titan Buff Fluid Acrylic. And I love these two colors together. They're, oh God, it's just luscious. And I'm holding the paintbrush differently than I normally do because I don't want to use my standard kind of marks or painting. And every time you shift the way you hold a tool, you will get different output than you normally get. And that's what I'm looking for. Now here's some of this gorgeous teal. This is actually a Blick Professional Fluid Acrylic Paint, and it's gorgeous. And I do love the teal mixed in with this red transparent oxide. It gets me super excited, and it gives that lusciousness that I like to start with. I'm not convinced at the end of the day that these colors will show through. Oh God, look at that. That is a piece of medical exam paper that I put down to absorb some of the liquid off of and some of the paint off of the page, and I can use that paper for collage later. If you saw my video a couple weeks ago where I showed you different things you can do on days when you're not feeling a lot of creativity, one of them was cutting down your paper. And if you saw the segment of the medical exam paper being cut down, that little piece that you just saw me use was a 6-inch by 6-inch cut down piece of medical exam paper. For the case of 12 rolls of paper that I have, if I cut all of them down to that size, I would have 93,000 pieces of paper. So I love using it, and I don't worry about wasting paper because I have a ton of it. So you've seen me using the continuous spray bottle to spray some water both on the gel plate and onto the art itself. At this stage, I really enjoy working wet. It gives a lot of nice transparency. It makes the paint move easily, and it actually gives me a lot of time to think about what I want to do next. And I encourage you to use water actually as a tool while you are creating abstracted mixed media art. It's just a great way to extend and thin and make things a bit transparent. That brayer that you just saw me use, that's one of my mini brayers. I believe that one is a 1/2-inch brayer, and I'll link to all the supplies in the description. So if you're looking for that, that's where you'll find it. But these paints are just gorgeous. I also should mention that I laid down some Liquitex Mars Black, and this is just from their student series. That black that you see there is just a student grade paint. It is not a pro grade paint, and I'm just fine with that. It's just fine. So one of the things that a brayer does that is unique is once the paint goes down and you roll it out, it creates this really gorgeous blending of colors, and it sort of thins out the consistency of the acrylic paint. And I think it creates a blending that you can't really get any other way, and I love it. It's a bit textural and smooth at the same time. Huh, textural and smooth at the same time. That works. But it also does a great job of taking the edge off of really sharp bits of color, like that thread that you saw me go through and do there. I love that thread, but some of it just felt too sharp. And the brayer was the perfect solution for taking it down a notch and just sort of feathering out the edge a little bit. And this here's my silicone paint shaper tool, which you all know by this point. I love this tool. It allows me to work with some precision and yet at the same time allowing the opportunity for chance. Like you see there, that beautiful texture that was just created. And that really only comes from tools like the silicone paint shaper or the catalyst wedge, which you'll see me use in a bit also. This blue is coming from the light phthalo blue, which happens to be a not a fluid acrylic, but a airbrush acrylic. That's not the right name. It'll come to me. High flow acrylic. It's a flow acrylic, so it goes on very, very wet. And I want to remove some of that moisture using the medical exam paper. And that will do two things. It removes the moisture, but also gives me a beautiful piece of paper, transparent paper, to use in collage later. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. And this is the card. Actually, it's already been folded, so it is a card that's been taped down. And like the other two pieces that I was just working on, I want to get some marks down first. And that's just what I did. I used a Lyra graphite pencil. And what I love about using the graphite pencils is that they get a little bit smeary when liquid is applied, right? So not so much when you paint over it like this. In fact, I don't think this got smeary at all from this, but you'll see later the magic that happens when I do it and then intentionally hit it with water. Just beautiful things happen, and I love it. As always, I never know whether the marks I make are going to show up in the final look. I just love knowing that they're in there, and whether you can see them with your naked eye or not, they do make a difference and they add things. So I let this dry about a couple hours. It was fairly well dried before I went in. And looking at it, when it dried, all those beautiful layers looked very muted to me, which is okay, that's fine. But I thought I'd liven it up a little bit, spice it up, if you will. And so I'm going in with this combination of the Dick Blick Pyrrole Red and Pyrrole Orange to make this really bright hot orange, and I love it. And I'm using the Catalyst wedge here to move it around. And what I love about the Catalyst wedge, and the reason why I use it so much, is it's fantastic at moving paint around, but look at how it brought out all of that gorgeous layering below it so that it looks like a deeply textured, like physically textured piece, although it's not. So I just love it. I haven't found any other tool that does quite what the Catalyst wedge does. And to be very honest, I consider the wedge an extension of my hand when I am creating. Love it. Mm-mm-mm. At this point, I still don't know exactly the direction that I'm going to be taking these in. I'm just enjoying the process of layering and letting myself just do what my heart and my hands want to do. I'll get more concerned about it later, but for now, it's just fine. Right. Put that to the side, and I'm going to put down some more of the Titan Buff and this teal paint, and I'm just going to roll it out with the brayer. I don't mind the red mixing in with the teal, and I also don't mind the Titan Buff mixing in. If you watched the color study video from last week, you already know my theory about making colors work together. And if you're using the same palette with all these different layers, it's all going to work together. It's not something that you have to stress out about. So you could pick any colors you want and start working with them, so long as you're limited in the amount of paints that you're using at one time, but they'll retain their vibrancy on their own, and then they'll create these genuinely beautiful layers from their blending. And it also adds to the mystery of the art that you create, which of course is the kind of art that I love to make. I do like this combination though. You've seen it go from really muted to really hot, back to muted again, and it's keeping its integrity. And I love that. So I thought I would try something here. These are little wooden circles. They just craft circles. And I thought I would, get some paint on them and put them on the paper. I did, and you really couldn't see it. There just wasn't enough paint. So I thought I'd just go back into the gel plate and at least get a good print out of this. And that's what I did. I put that circle all over the plate, pulling up paint as I pulled up the circle. And hopefully that'll create some kind of cool texture. And oh, I like this print. Oh, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, and all the colors that we're using are represented right there in that one pull. Fantastic. Love it. See, it wasn't really a failed experiment. The circles just didn't work on the painting itself, but it worked just fine on the gel print. And just taking some of this leftover paint on the brayer and rolling it out onto the card. Sometimes when I'm working like this, I start to feel a little stressed, like, I don't know where this is going. And then I stop and remind myself it doesn't matter. It's just paint. And if I don't like the final result, I can just go over it. But this card was starting to bother me. Like the blue was just, it was too even all the way around. So I went back in with the Lyra pencil. And as you can see right now, I hit it with some water and it's doing that gorgeous smeary thing that I love so much. So just taking the paintbrush, moving around the graphite just a little bit, not a lot. I like the contrast that the raw graphite brings to what's on the paper already. And I'm just going to let it dry. See how I like it once it's dry. It's been a few hours since I was working on this. Everything is dry now. And the graphite is pretty set. I mean, if I hit it with water again, it would reactivate and move around. But it's set enough where I can go over it with the acrylic paint and it is not going to move, at least not very much, from where it is. And what I noticed when I came back to this piece was that I really wanted to go hot with this. I wanted to go really vibrant. So I went in with raw, unmixed teal, and I liked it. But then I thought, I need to bring in something else. And so I grabbed the other two cards that I'm working on, and I brought in that Daryl-eyed yellow. If you recall from last week's video, when I used the Daryl-eyed yellow, I learned so much about it. And I've been using this paint for a long time. But what I learned last week is that Daryl-eyed yellow is a very dominant color. And if you're going to be using it, it's going to make itself known in your piece. And that's exactly what I felt like these two pieces needed. Like they needed a punch of a different color than what we had been using. So although when I started today, I did not intend to use the Daryl-eyed yellow, the pieces at this point said to me, you need it because there's too much sameness here. And I love what's happening by adding it in there. Not just on top of the reds and the red-orange, but how it's mixing with the teal, how it's mixing with the Titan buff. It's kind of magical. And it was exactly the punch that I think these pieces needed at this point. Super fun to use. So at this point, I want the colors to start keeping their own character. We have an awful lot of blending going on and color mixing from the layers below. And at this point, I want to see some of the colors really in their pure form. And if I did that with the Catalyst Wedge or even the silicone paint shaper, what I risk is over blending it. So again, I pulled out that skinny brayer and I put just a tiny amount of paint on it and skip rolled it to get the pure color just in sporadic places. Now I'm doing that here with this Daryl-eyed yellow and it's too much. Right, so I'm going in with another piece of the medical exam paper. I'm getting this gorgeous yellow and red that I can use in some other collage at some point, or maybe even this one, I don't know. But I wanted that yellow to stand out, and by really rolling it on, it was too much, so I had to stop. And yet I still don't have that pure Daryl-eyed yellow, so I'm going back in with my finger and just sort of finger painting. How fun is that? When's the last time you finger painted? I know some people will be concerned about my health and safety, and I appreciate that. I did go in right after I did this and washed my hands so that the paint would not remain on there. Uh, I am not overly concerned about that. Perhaps I should be. You do what's right for you. And one thing I wanted to say about these two pieces that are on the same piece of paper, these are sisters, not twins, meaning the final result, they should resemble one another, but they should not look exactly like each other. And I am really not trying to make them look exactly like each other. So just know you can do that and it's fun, right? Not doing identical, but making something similar but different. So as this is drying, I'm cutting up some of this Thai Gossamer paper, and really it truly feels like fabric. And one of the things I love about this is not just the gorgeous pattern, that grid pattern, but that it's very delicate in its own way, and you can string out individual threads. And I love that because it adds this sense of lack of control and whimsy to a very structured piece that will go into this collage. Now, I grabbed the matte medium and I'm putting it right down on the paper. And I'm going to use the silicone paint shaper to move it around. And you do not need a ton, but you need enough. So this Thai Gossamer paper is very fibrous and it's going to absorb quite a bit of that matte medium. So you want to make sure you have good coverage so that all of the Gossamer paper is actually attached to the painted surface. So to start, I very gingerly press it down with the paint shaper to make sure there's good adhesion. I am also checking to make sure that the Gossamer is not going over the tape edge. If it does, it's okay. We can cut it later with a straight edge blade, but as much as possible, I don't want it going over the tape. So I'm just being super cognizant of that, and you should too. Yeah, this is fun. I like that a lot. I really like it a lot. I'm going to do something a little bit different actually on this side. Again, sisters, not twins. And while I'm doing that, I want to let you know I have a lot of really terrific free resources that are available. My favorite one is the gel plate video course. It's 100% free, and you can get it as well as all my other free resources by clicking the link that's in the description and just signing up. You'll be on my mailing list. I just send out one email a week and it lets you know about the week's video and some, information about me and things that are going on. And you get the free gel plate video course, which is fantastic. So if that's something that you're interested in, go ahead, click that link in the description and subscribe, and you will be sent directly to the video course. All right. So I laid down just a couple of threads from the that fell off of the gossamer paper, and I just liked the way they looked. So I laid them down in quite a bit of matte medium. I'll talk about that in a second. And then I went over it with a more solid piece of the gossamer paper. I liked the dichotomy of the really thin, wispy bits and the really strong structured piece of paper, and that it all came from the same thing, right? So I used as much matte medium as I did because I knew I was going to be moving around these little wispy bits and I didn't want them to get caught up in anything. So the matte medium actually helped to allow me to slide the pieces into the exact spots that I wanted. Here, I'm just cutting down a couple of the threads. They were all pretty much exactly the same length. I don't enjoy that. I like some variation, and that's what I did there. Okay, and this is the card, and I have a thinner piece of the Gossamer paper. And I started putting it on here, and I felt like there wasn't enough contrast. Uh, just that gossamer over the derylide yellow. Um, Maybe it was because it was a thin piece of the gossamer. I don't know. I just didn't love the way that it looked. So I thought I would lay down some of that medical exam paper that we created earlier just by picking up leftover paint, right? And so that's the red piece that I just put down. I put it down with gloss medium. I sprayed the paper with water to get it wet. Then used the gloss medium, put the paper down on the gloss medium, and then went over it with gloss medium again. That's how you get the paper to go transparent. If you don't know that, go ahead and watch the video that I did on transparency and translucency. I've linked to all the videos that I've mentioned here in the description. Check it out. It's very cool. So I let these dry overnight, and I'm getting super excited about what I'm seeing here. Acrylics have a tendency to dry a little darker than they appear when they're wet, and that did happen here. And I am thrilled to death with the intensity of the color. I mean, this is quite a bit out of my wheelhouse in terms of colors, and yet I absolutely love it. So what you see me doing here is I took the straight edge blade because I did have a couple pieces of the Gossamer, went over the tape edge, and because I'm going to pull the tape now, I definitely wanted to make sure that I cut it before I started pulling. If I had not, I would most likely definitely rip the paper, and I don't want to do that. So I am just heating up the tape that has the word above on it. I heated up that piece of tape, the entire length of it, and then I'm going back in and I am slowly pulling the tape back and hitting it with the blow dryer at the same time. Now, I know you all have seen videos of people pulling tape, and it's so sexy, and we all love the big reveal. The way I do it is not so sexy looking, but the reveal is awesome. So you have to go through a little bit of ugly to get to the very, very pretty. Right, and what I just did here is I totally jumped the film. It took a long time to blow dry and pull and blow dry and pull, and that's not that much fun to watch. So here's the last piece. That was the last piece of tape to come up. But we are not done, right? I love how this looks. It looks great, but we're not done. So even though I taped off the edges, there's some bleeding that happened and there's some gum left on the paper from the tape. So I just grabbed a Mr. Clean Magic brush, magic sponge, listed in the description below, and I used it to rub off the gummy parts from the tape, right? That tape had actually been on there for several days, so it just really stuck to the paper. The magic eraser works beautifully. So I truly feel like everybody should have some magic eraser in the studio. It does wonders for all sorts of things. Now that I got that fixed, I'm going to go ahead and cut down the two pieces so that they are in fact two pieces. And there we go. Love it. And you may be noticing, I'm certainly noticing, that there is some bleed around some of the edges. And although that's never ideal, I'm sort of glad it happened so I can show you how to fix it, right? I am using some titanium white fluid acrylic here and just a very small flat square brush. I'm putting a tiny bit of the paint on the brush, and I am not brushing it on the paper. I'm actually tapping on it, just tapping little bits of paint down on the bleed. Let's see if I can show you a close-up from the top-down view. Yeah, there we go. So you go ahead and you just keep tapping down wherever there's some bleed. You can see there's quite a bit actually down near the bottom part of this piece on the right-hand side. And as I go, you just go slowly and tap down the paint. Here's why. If you start brushing out the paint, there's going to be areas where it thins out and it's going to go over onto the white of the paper and it's going to look like you touched up the paint. When you do this technique, it's one of these techniques that I learned when I was faux finishing. When you do this, it does a phenomenal job of hiding the bleed without creating any brush strokes to have that, telltale, oh, you went outside the lines. Now, you all know I don't really care about going outside the lines if it's something for me. But these are cards that I hope to give to people. And so I really want it. I want the attention to the detail to come across. Are they going to know that I covered up bleed through? No, but I'll know, and that matters, right? So this is just a great technique. You can use this in so many ways when you're painting. The things that I learned as a finisher doing furniture and cabinetry has carried with me to this day, and there's little tips and tricks like this that make all the difference. Love it. And this is the card, and I'm really happy with it. Uh, the quality of this watercolor paper, I have to be honest, is not great. I will list it in the description just because I always list everything I use, but I don't necessarily love the quality of this paper for a card. You can see it's kind of wobbly and weird looking. It's great for these two pieces here, but the card is just a little bit wonky. So maybe I'll just send myself a card for those days when I don't feel so great. But yeah, I love the art on it. Just the paper's a little, eh. But these other two, I absolutely love. This is where I live. This is Southern California. That was unintentional, and it 100% looks like January in Southern California. The January sunsets are spectacular. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been super fun for me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will come back next week as well.